I was standing outside a gas station on a Tuesday night, coffee in hand, not thinking about anything in particular, when Marcus walked past me on the way to his car and stopped. Marcus and I had played rec league basketball together for about a season 2 years back. We were friendly the way you get friendly with someone you see every Thursday night for 6 months. Easy, uncomplicated, the kind of friendly that does not require maintenance. He stopped and turned around and looked at me with an expression I could not immediately read. He said, "Hey man, did you ever pay Tyler back?" He's still bringing it up. I said, "Pay him back for what?" Marcus shifted his weight. He said the money. He's been saying it for a while now. Like a lot. I set my coffee down on the hood of my car. I asked him how much. He named a figure. It was not a small figure. It was the kind of number that implies a history, a series of transactions, a pattern, a relationship with a financial dimension that both people would remember. I said, "I have never taken a single dollar from Tyler. Not one." Marcus looked at me for a long second. Not like he thought I was lying. More like he was recalibrating something. He said, "Dude, he's told everyone." He walked to his car, and I stood next to mine in the gas station lot. And the night was quiet, and the fluorescent lights overhead were doing what fluorescent lights do, and I stood there while 12 years of friendship rearranged itself behind my eyes into something I did not recognize. 12 years. Since we were 15 and in the same gym class, and he tripped over a hurdle, and I did not laugh, and he said afterward, "You're all right." And that was how it started. 12 years of showing up, of being the person who answered the phone, of being the one in the room when things went wrong for him. And somewhere in those 12 years, apparently, I had also become the person who owed him money he had never given me. I picked my coffee back up. I got in my car. I sat there for a while before I started the engine. I got home and dropped my keys on the table and did not take my jacket off. I opened my laptop and logged into my banking app and filtered the transaction history by name. I scrolled. Every transfer between Tyler and me that existed in 6 years of banking records went one direction. My account to his. Restaurant tabs he had said he would sort out and then didn't. A flight to Nashville 2 years ago when he said he was short and would get me back after his next check. Half of a wedding gift for a mutual friend because he said splitting it made more sense than 2 separate gifts and he'd handle his half when he got paid. Small amounts mostly. $30 here. 80 there. 120 once when his power was going to be cut. Nothing that felt significant in the moment. Steady. I sat at my desk and looked at the screen for a while. Before I closed the laptop, I went back to what Marcus had said at the gas station. He said Tyler had told people I borrowed the money during my dad's hospital thing. That I had never brought it up again, so Tyler had stopped asking. That Tyler had said it the way you say something when you are being gracious about it. Like he was protecting me by not making it a thing. My father had been in the hospital 3 years ago. Cardiac event. 6 days inpatient. Tyler had shown up on day 2 with food and had sat with me in the waiting room for 4 hours, and I had been genuinely grateful for that. I had told people Tyler showed up for me during the hardest week of that year. I had said it more than once. He had taken that week and built a debt out of it. I looked at the bourbon bottle on my shelf. Tyler had brought it last month, carried it in under his arm like a gift, and we had sat in my apartment until 2 in the morning while he walked me through a business idea he was developing. He had hugged me at the door when he left and said, "Love you, brother." I had meant it back. I remembered now that he had mentioned the bourbon came from a party at someone else's place. He had brought me something that had already been given to him. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Tyler. A meme, no caption, the kind he sent 6 or 7 times a week. The ambient noise of a friendship that felt constant and easy and present. I looked at it for a long time. Then I put the phone face down on the desk and closed the laptop and sat in my apartment in the quiet and thought about 12 years and tried to figure out how many people had already heard a version of me that I had never been. I called Danny that night and asked if he could do lunch the next day. He said yes without asking why, which was one of the things about Danny. He did not require a reason to show up. We met at the diner in Hyde Park we had been going to since 2019. We ordered the usual, and talked about nothing for the first half of the meal the way you do when you're working up to something. Halfway through, I put my fork down and told him what Marcus had said at the gas station. Danny listened. Then he put his own fork down. He said, man, he told me too, about a year ago. Said you were going through something with your dad, and he didn't want to push you on it. I stopped chewing. Danny said, I figured you knew he was waiting on it. I figured you'd handle it eventually. I asked him how much Tyler had said. Danny named a figure. It was larger than the number Marcus had given me, not by a small margin. I said, he told different people different amounts. Danny looked at the table. He said, he cried a little when he told me, dude. Like actual tears. Said he didn't know how to ask you for it back without making things weird. I sat with that for a moment. Tyler had cried. Tyler had performed the specific discomfort of a loyal friend who was owed something and too decent to press for it. And Danny had believed it, because why would he not believe it? Tyler had been his friend too since college, and people who cry about something are usually telling the truth about it. I asked Danny who else knew. He listed names. 4 in our core group. 2 were people I considered close enough to call without a particular reason. 1 was a woman named Priya that Tyler had introduced me to last year. We had gone on 3 dates. After the 3rd, she had gone quiet in a way I could not explain, and I had eventually stopped reaching out and told myself it was just chemistry, timing, the usual. I understood now that it was probably something else. That evening, my mother called from Dayton. She asked how I was doing, asked if everything was okay financially, in the careful way she asked things when she already had a reason to ask. I said yes, why? She said, honey, Janet from church asked me last week if you needed help. She said her son had heard something. I closed my eyes. I told my mother everything was fine. I told her not to worry about it. I told her Janet's son had gotten some bad information and I would sort it out. She said okay in a voice she used when she believed me, but was going to keep an eye on it anyway. I hung up and sat with the phone in my hand. Tyler had told different people different amounts. He had calibrated the number to whoever was listening, which meant he was not recounting a memory. He was managing a story. He had cried in front of Danny. He had framed it as patience and loyalty at the gas station. He had let it reach my mother's church. 12 years. And somewhere inside all of it, he had found a version of me that was useful to him, and he had been running it ever since. I texted Tyler on Wednesday and kept it simple. Just asked if he wanted to grab a beer Thursday night. He said absolutely. Sent 3 separate replies after that with suggestions on where to go, and showed up 40 minutes late to the bar I had already chosen, smiling wide, arms open before he even reached the table. He hugged me, dropped into the seat across from mine, and flagged the bartender down for an IPA before he had taken his jacket off. Then he launched into a story about a job interview he'd had that morning. The recruiter, the panel, the question they asked that he crushed, the follow-up he was expecting by Friday. He was animated and easy and completely himself. I let him finish. Then I said, Tyler, have you been telling people I owe you money? His face did something complicated. Not guilt exactly. More like a man who had been holding something loosely and felt it shift. He laughed, small and uncertain, and said, dude, what? Who said that? I named Marcus. I named 2 people from Danny's list. Tyler shook his head. He said, man, you know how people twist things. I might have said once that things were tight and you'd help me through stuff. They probably heard it backwards. I said, help me through stuff how? He waved his hand. You know, emotionally. Being there. I said, just answer the question. Did you tell people I borrowed money from you or not? He looked down at his beer. He said, I might have said something stupid once when I was drunk. I don't really remember. Then he looked up. His eyes were wet. He said, dude, you're my oldest friend. You think I'd do that to you? Whoever told you this is jealous of us? People always try to mess with what we have. I said, Tyler. He said, brother, please don't make this a big thing. We've known each other since we were kids. You don't know how hard it's been. I looked at him for a moment. Then I paid the tab, both drinks, out of habit, without thinking, and walked out. I was 10 minutes into the drive home when I realized what I had done. I had just paid for the beer of a man who had spent an unknown number of years telling people in my city that I owed him money. I had done it automatically, the way I had always done it, the way he had always counted on me to do it. I drove the rest of the way home in the dark and thought about the wet eyes and the word brother and the way he had said, "You don't know how hard it's been," turning it in the last possible second back into something I owed him. Danny called Friday night around 9. He said he had spent the day asking around carefully. His word, carefully, which meant he had been precise about it, and I trusted that. And he had a list. 7 people. He read the names and the figures over the phone. I wrote them in a notebook because he was right to be careful, and I wanted to be careful too, and I did not trust myself to hold all of it accurately in my head. The smallest figure anyone had been told was around $800. The largest was over $4,000. The amounts in between were spread across the names in no pattern I could identify. Not based on how close the person was to me or to Tyler. Not based on when they'd been told. Not based on anything I could trace to a logic. He had told different people different amounts because he was not remembering a thing that happened. He was manufacturing a number for each conversation based on what would land. Danny said, "Man, one of these names is your boss's brother-in-law. Did you know that?" I was quiet for a moment. I said no. Danny said, "He's been telling people in your professional circle. This isn't just personal anymore." I wrote that name down separately and underlined it and closed the notebook. Saturday afternoon, my cousin in Chicago messaged me. Her roommate's brother knew Tyler through a job they had overlapped on briefly, and apparently Tyler had told him he was carrying me financially because of the situation at home. My father's cardiac event, the hospitalization 2 years ago, the bills that had been significant and that I was still paying down on a plan I had set up myself, quietly, without asking anyone for anything. Tyler had visited the hospital twice. He had brought a bag of vending machine snacks the second time. He had sat with me in the waiting room for a while, and I had been grateful for it. I had told people he showed up for me. He had taken that and told someone he was carrying me. Sunday morning, I opened my banking app again. 6 years of statements. Every Venmo, every Zelle, every card charge I could connect to Tyler's name or a place we had been together. I exported everything into a spreadsheet and added it up. The number was uncomfortable. Not because it was enormous. Not in any single transaction, but because of what it looked like across 6 years. 30 here, 80 there, 120 a flight, half a gift, a tab he forgot. Steady. Directional. Always the same direction. I sat at my desk for a long time looking at it. My phone buzzed. Tyler, sending a meme. No caption. The ambient noise of a friendship that wanted to keep sounding normal. I did not open it. I thought about my boss's brother-in-law. I thought about Priya going quiet after the 3rd date. I thought about my mother's voice on the phone, asking carefully if everything was okay financially. I thought about the figure Danny had read me. Over 4,000, the largest one. And I thought about the fact that Tyler had said while crying to someone who cared about me, and the tears had made it true enough to pass. The question I kept returning to was not how to prove it. I had the statements. The proof was already there, clean and exportable and 6 years deep. The question was how to correct a record that had already traveled this far without looking exactly like the man Tyler had told everyone I was. I sat on my balcony Monday night until after midnight. The notebook was on the table next to me with 7 names in it. My laptop was open on the bank statements. The city was doing what cities do at that hour. Quieter but not quiet, a few cars, distant voices, the particular quality of late-night air that makes everything feel both clearer and heavier at the same time. I thought about the simplest version of this. Block Tyler's number. Stop showing up to the group plans. Let the story lose oxygen and eventually die from neglect. Move through the next year or two without confrontation, without spectacle, without having to sit across from someone I had known since I was 11 and say the thing that could not be unsaid once it was out. I thought about how tired I was. Not angry exactly, just tired. The specific tiredness that comes from finding out that something you thought was one thing was actually another thing, and that the adjustment is not a single moment, but a long process of going back through your own memory and re-examining everything with different information. My mother called Tuesday morning. She was more direct this time. She asked if I was in some kind of trouble. She said Janet from church had mentioned it again at the Wednesday potluck, and some of the other women had apparently nodded like they had heard something too. I heard the worry in her voice, the specific worry of a mother who had watched her son manage a hospital payment plan quietly and alone and had never fully stopped wondering how he was carrying it. I told her slowly and clearly that I had never borrowed money from anyone. Not from Tyler. Not from anyone. Ever. I heard her exhale. Then she said, "Honey, when something is said about you and you don't answer it, people decide the silence is the answer. Your father is the same way. Don't be like him. Speak." I said, "Mom, it's complicated." She said, "It's not complicated. It's true or it's not. Which one is it?" I said, "It's not true." She said, "Then say it where they said it." We hung up, and I sat with that for a while. Tuesday evening, Tyler called. I watched the phone ring and let it go to voicemail. He called again 4 minutes later. I picked up. He was crying. Not the quiet, wet-eyed thing from the bar. Actually crying, audible, the kind that sounds like it has been building for a few days. He said he had heard I was asking around about him. He said, "Brother, please. I'll do anything. Don't ruin me. I have nothing." I listened. I let him finish. Then I said, "I'll call you back," and I hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, and I held two things at the same time. My mother's voice telling me to say it where they said it, and Tyler's voice saying, "I have nothing," which was true in the way that things are true when someone has built their entire relational life on being owed and has nothing left when the debt is questioned. Walking away was not neutral. I had been telling myself it was the clean option, the unbothered option, the option that kept me above it. But my mother was right, and I already knew she was right before she said it. Walking away meant the story finished its work without any interference from the only person who could actually stop it. I opened my laptop. I looked at the statements again. 6 years, clean and directional and exportable. Then I picked up my phone and texted Danny. I texted Danny Wednesday morning and asked if he could talk. He called me back within the hour. I told him what I wanted. 7 people in one room. The same people who had been told the story, gathered in the same place, so the correction could travel the same distance the lie had. Danny was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Why not just send the bank statements in a group chat? Get it done." I said, "Because Tyler can reframe a screenshot. He can't reframe a face." Danny was quiet again. Then he said, "Okay, I know a place. Back room at the brewery on Sycamore. My firm uses it for events. I'll handle the invitations." I asked him what he would tell people. He said he would keep it simple, just that there was something that needed to be addressed in person, and he was asking them to show up. He said most of them would come because they were already uncomfortable about what they had been told, and people who are uncomfortable want resolution. I thought he was probably right. He said, he's going to figure out what this is before Saturday. I said, let him. If he doesn't show up, that's an answer too. Danny said, and if he does? I said, then we let the room hear what it should have heard a year ago. We picked Saturday evening, and I got off the phone and went to my desk. Thursday, I built the file. 6 years of statements printed and organized by year. Every transaction connected to Tyler highlighted in yellow, his name in the recipient field, or a location that corresponded to something we had done together where I had covered his share. I wrote a single summary sheet for the top of the folder. Total transactions. Total amount. Direction of every one of them. I printed 2 copies. I put them in a plain folder. I did not tell Tyler anything was happening. Friday evening, his text came in at 6 p.m. Hey man, are you free tomorrow night? Let's grab a drink, just us. I want to talk for real. I read it once. Then I typed back. I have a thing tomorrow night. Danny's putting it together. You're invited. I hit send and watched the screen. The read receipt appeared. Then the typing indicator. 3 dots. Appearing and disappearing and appearing again. I watched it start and stop 4 times over the course of about 2 minutes. Then it stopped and did not come back. No reply. I put the phone down and looked at the folder on my desk. The brewery was booked. The people were invited. The statements were printed, and the total was written at the top in plain numbers. Tyler knew something was coming. Whether he walked into that room or not, the story was about to meet the only thing it had never encountered in however many years it had been traveling. The actual record. They were all there by 8. 7 people around a table in the back room of the brewery. The kind of room with exposed brick and a door that closed all the way, and enough ambient noise from the front of the building that the silence inside felt deliberate. Danny was at one end. I sat at the other with the folder in front of me, closed. At 8:14, Tyler walked in. He was smiling, apologizing for being late, something about parking, touching 2 of the men on the shoulder as he moved around the table. He sat down across from me, and his eyes found mine, and his smile held for exactly 1 beat too long before it settled into something more careful. I opened the folder. I did not raise my voice. I said, "Some of you have been told by Tyler that I've borrowed money from him. The amounts varied depending on who he was speaking to. I want to address that tonight." I passed the printed statements down both sides of the table. I named each person in the room and named the figure they had been told. Tyler's head came up on the 3rd name. He said, "Dude, what is this? Why are we doing this here?" Danny said quietly, "Let him finish, Tyler." The room went still in the way rooms go still when everyone decides at the same moment to pay attention. I walked them through it. 6 years of transactions. Every transfer I had made to Tyler's account by name. Every covered meal, every tab, every flight, every half of a gift, every $120 for a power bill. I showed them the summary sheet. I showed them the total. Then I said, "There is no transaction in the other direction. Not one. Not a single dollar from his account to mine across 6 years." I looked at Tyler. "You can correct me right now if I'm wrong. Show one transfer." One. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. At the far end of the table, the boss's brother-in-law pushed his chair back slightly. Not leaving, just moving. The small physical adjustment of a man recalibrating. Tyler said, "Brother, you're humiliating me in front of everyone. After everything, is this what our friendship is to you?" I said, "Show one transfer, Tyler." He said, "I don't have to prove anything to you." I said, "You proved a lot to them." Danny leaned forward. He said, "He told me you cried, Tyler, about money he never took. Actual tears. Why did you do that?" The room was very quiet. Tyler looked at the table. He looked at his hands. He looked at the folder in front of me. He looked at the faces around the table and found no version of any of them that was going to help him. After a long silence, he said, very quietly, "I don't know." Nobody asked him to repeat it. Nobody needed to. The room had heard it, and the room understood what it meant. Not a denial, not a deflection, not another reframe. Just a man at the end of something, saying the only true thing he had said all night. Sunday morning, my phone had 2 messages in it before 9 o'clock, both from people who had been in the room. Both apologies. The first was brief and genuine and said he should have questioned it when he heard it. The second was the boss's brother-in-law. He had written a long message, 4 paragraphs, carefully worded, saying he had repeated the story at a family dinner sometime last spring and that he would correct it the next time he saw those people. He said he appreciated the clarity. He said he was sorry for the part he had played in it traveling further than it should have. I read it twice. Then I typed back 2 words, "Thank you." I did not elaborate. There was nothing to add that would improve on the statement already made or the acknowledgement already given. I put the phone down and made coffee and let Sunday be Sunday. Monday afternoon, a message came through in one of the group chats, and I noticed the participant count was lower than it had been. Tyler's name was gone. No announcement. No explanation. Nobody had posted anything about it. He was simply no longer there. By Tuesday, it had happened in a second chat. Wednesday morning, a third. The narrator understands something he had not fully understood before Saturday night. The room had been holding its own doubts about Tyler for longer than he knew. His presentation had not created those doubts. It had simply given people permission to act on what they had already been carrying. Wednesday evening, my doorbell rang at 7 p.m. I checked the camera and opened the door. Tyler was not crying this time. He was angry. The specific anger of a man who has been comfortable for a long time and has just become uncomfortable and is holding the wrong person responsible for the change. He stood in my doorway and said I had destroyed his life. He said nobody would lend him anything anymore. He said I had turned everyone against him. I let him finish. Then I said, I didn't turn anyone. I just stopped covering for you. He said, you couldn't just talk to me, man. You had to do it like that, in front of everyone. You know what people are saying about me now. I said, I know what people were saying about me. For a year, while you sent me memes. He said, so this is revenge. I said, this is the truth. The fact that it costs you what the lie cost me, that's not revenge. That's just math. He stood in the hallway with nothing left to say. I closed the door. I stood on my side of it and listened. His footsteps did not move for almost a full minute. I stood there and he stood there and the door was between us, and I thought about being 15 and watching him trip over a hurdle and choosing not to laugh, and him saying afterward, you're all right, and how simply and completely I had believed in that version of us for the next 12 years. Then his footsteps moved away down the hall, and I heard the elevator open and close. I went back to my kitchen and finished making dinner. 6 weeks after the move, I was sitting on my back patio on a Saturday morning with a coffee. The sun was up. The yard was quiet. My phone rang. It was my father. I answered. He said he was at the hardware store and wanted to know what brand of caulk I used in the guest suite bathroom because the new place needed some work. I told him. He said thanks. There was a pause. Then he said your mother asked me to ask you to come for dinner next month. I asked if he was asking or if she was. He said I am asking. I said then I will come. He said okay. He would tell her. I said tell her what you want, Dad. He went quiet. Then he said goodbye. I said goodbye. He hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand. That conversation, 5 sentences long, no performance in any of them, was the first honest call I had had with anyone in my family in years. No agenda, no manipulation, just my father at a hardware store asking about caulk and then asking about dinner. He said, I'm asking. Not she wants to see you. Not you should come. I am asking. That was different. That was him, not her. I did not know if he would keep being that person. But he had been him for 5 sentences. That was something. I set the phone face down on the table. I picked up my coffee. The guest suite door was visible through the kitchen window behind me. It was open, not closed anymore. I had opened it one morning the week before and just left it that way. It was empty, full of nothing but morning light. The carpet was still there. The closet system I installed was still there. But no one was sleeping in it. No one was telling stories about me from behind that door. It was just a room again. That was what I had wanted. Not revenge. Not an apology. Just a room. Just the truth. Just a father who could say, I'm asking and mean it. I drank my coffee. The morning was quiet. The door was open. The phone did not ring again. I sat there for a long time. Not waiting. Just sitting. The sun got higher. The coffee got cold. I did not care. The quiet was different now. It was not the quiet of holding something in. It was the quiet of having put it down. The guest suite was empty. The story my mother told was still out there somewhere. But I was not in it anymore. I had written myself out. Not with a speech. With a 30-day notice. With a closed door that became an open one. With a phone call that lasted 5 sentences and changed everything. Not because my father said anything grand. Because he said I am asking. That was enough. That was everything. I finished my coffee. I went inside. I walked past the guest suite. The light was coming through the window. The room was ready for something new. I did not know what yet. I did not need to know today. Today I just let be empty. That was the gift of the truth. Not answers. Space. Space to breathe. Space to decide. Space to leave the door open and see who walks in. Not who performs. Who walks in. I was ready. Finally ready. To see who would come, and who would not. Either way, the door was open. That was the only promise I could make. The only one I needed to keep. I kept it. The door stayed open. The morning stayed quiet. I stayed. That was enough. That was everything. am over at where silence ends. What door in your life are you finally ready to leave open after years of keeping it closed?